Ben Simmons gives an interview to Mark Spears at Anscaped. He is the SEO is he's locked in. He says he's locked in for a comeback from injury.
I don't think anybody knows what SEO is.
Search engine optimization. I hopefully have one listener.
The short title that you see on the little tab bar. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's true. I should have thought better. But
can I? We're gonna break down if he can make good on the claims that he put forth. I think in as serious a way as we can do here. There's a lot of ridiculousness about Ben Simmons that is very well documented. We've had fun at his expense on this show because it has just been an insane 2 years for a lot of different reasons. To take some of the load off of him when it comes to this interview and get one silly thing out of the way before we try to break his basketball game down, what is the question posed by Mark Spears about why, after KD and Kyrie asked out, that Ben Simmons did not also ask for a trade? What was the goal with that question? What would have happened? What would it, like, Ben Simmons not getting traded? That is the most, like, just putting him in such a bad spot, such a misunderstanding of every context going on with the Brooklyn Nets and Ben Simmons' career.
Yeah,
that
not
Ben
even
Simmons walking into Sean Mark's office would have gone well at all.
Yeah, that's not a Nets thing. That's a Ben Simmons has no ground to ask for a trade. Like it was hard for him for Ascorn in Philly with where things ended up. And I don't know what that trade for him looks like unless James Harden also at the same time, unless all of that just kind of breaks in a certain way, right? It got really complicated. And
depending on what you believe, that could have been Tyrese Halliburton. So actually, history, the sliding doors moment there actually could have gone a lot better for them. But no, it got ugly for sure.
Yeah, so I just look, there are a few number of players in this league that can actually go to a general manager, a president of basketball operations, a head coach and owner, look their locker room in the face, I would assume, and be like, yeah, I want to trade. And it not just be something that gets scoffed at. You will
also, as if Ben Simmons hasn't been clowned online enough, Mark Spears is assuming he wants to dig himself a deeper hole by asking for another trade out of a city that he barely did anything for. Come on, Mark.
It was just a weird question, weird phrasing. He asked, the next question was, what do you love about Brooklyn? He could have just asked how do you like playing in Brooklyn? What has it been like living there or wherever he lives in New York? What has it been like living there after being in Philly and all that stuff? Brendon, here's where I'm at with Ben Simmons. I don't feel like we know exactly what he is anymore. And I think that makes any projections of him incredibly difficult. Where are you at on this?
Why can't he just be exactly what he was in Philly by the end? Which by the end was much different than in the middle. But let's just say he is what he was in the second round against Atlanta, the last games he played as a Sixer, where he's incredibly hesitant to shoot the ball, to absorb contact in any way, shape, or form, but is still a really valuable wing defender, versatile, switchable guy who can really juice your transition offense and create great shots for teammates. Can he not be that?
I guess it's just is Brooklyn even the right place for that? What is the right place for that? Right?
In what way? Basketball wise or vibe wise?
Basketball purely. I don't want to get into vibes. I don't think anyone can really speak to what Ben Simmons' actual vibe is.
I think basketball wise, it's pretty perfect for him. And I guess Nick Claxton is somewhat of a less than perfect fit, but for the same reason we thought this was a pretty nice Kevin Durant team, it's also a pretty nice Ben Simmons team. They have wings galore, shooters galore, and honestly, what they're kind of lacking in is ball handling. So if you're telling me Spencer Dinwiddie doesn't have to do everything in terms of dribbling and passing anymore, and they can put, him, Dinwiddie, McHale, Cam, and Claxton out there, and you're getting that 2021 Ben Simmons again, it seems pretty maybe. I mean, that's better than Philadelphia for him, right? That's better than Embiid mucking things up and Tobias not wanting to shoot threes and whatever else was going on by the end there, in my opinion.
Yes. I think that's right. I think it's like for Brooklyn, I guess this would be different if Brooklyn had like a 21-year-old blue chip guy to really cater to. Right now, that's just not the situation that franchise is in, and maybe that works in Ben's favor. It's like they have Mikal Bridges, who had an amazing upswing in what he was and what he showed he was capable of. Maybe Brendon, you as his biggest fan, maybe thought he always could do that, but like he really showed the world something different once he got to Brooklyn after
for 1/3 of a season and not the playoffs.
Yes, sure, but like
so there is, I think, actually to your point with Mikal, they probably want to let him mess around and experiment a little more.
But it's not like they have him and like Cade Cunningham or him and Jalen Green. Yeah. It's not like he's in Houston and there's like a bunch of bodies. It's like you look at this roster, it's like
Cam Thomas, you're forgetting. I mean, future All-Star.
Is on a world is okay, but like it's like Dinwiddie and Royce O'Neal and Lonnie Walker the 4. Like it's Dennis Smith. It's there is no one aside from Mikal on this team that you're really just like, okay, we actually really need to let Ben, like it's detrimental to this person to let Ben try to figure himself out. Like the Nets are not a title contender this year. They owe Ben Simmons a lot of money for the next several years. Like it is, whether for trade value or whether just to figure out if you can like play him. Like it is only 2 more years, so it's not like we're looking at like 5 years here. It's 2 more seasons for 37.8 and then 40.3. Like so, it's not like it's still a lot of money, but it's not like the craziest contract at this point.
Yeah,
but like there's not like. If there is a world, to your point, where like he can get him a lot, like if there's a situation where he could play himself out, it is probably not a bad one for a coach in Jacques Vaughn, who seems to be getting rave reviews from his players. B, in a situation where there's no real expectation to win a ton of games, just to like have a good culture right now, as a kind of still like a post KD Kyrie reset. And C, in a situation where like there's one other kind of lead ball handler guy who absolutely is going to just deserves at his age and what he is and what he could be to surge in a certain way. Like again, there's no Cade Cunningham here. There's no Jalen Green here. There's no Scoot Henderson that just got drafted coming in here. Like it's all things considered not a bad spot for Simmons if they're going to let him play. The question is, I just think it's curious to see like how like are we going to know early with this? Are we going to like is he just going to go from the rip? Like how does that look is really my big question here.
Yeah, there's a couple things I think that'll decide that. One is it seemed like Jacques Vaughn was pretty frustrated by the whole thing last year, right?
Which doesn't surprise me, and I think that's very fair. If you're a head coach, you want certainty, you want dependability, you want, especially if you're him who's trying to like build something amid a lot of chaos.
Yeah.
Like I get it.
Absolutely. And so does that get better? What position does he see Ben Simmons playing on this team? You know, he made the decision before Ben got shut down with the back thing that Simmons was just going to basically be like a backup center, and then he wasn't even good enough at that. And I think if I remember the trajectory of everything correctly, he was getting DNPs, like coach's decision before even the back stuff really started to flare up. But you look at the numbers and you know, his at-rim frequency went down a little bit last year, but still for a, you know, theoretically a guard was pretty high. And then his finishing actually went up, you know, obviously not as high a volume because he just didn't play very much, but finished 69% at the basket. And, you know, those are the shots you want him taking. He, you know, is fallen off a lot in terms of how much he gets shooting fouls drawn and things like that. But again, if he's not a premier and focal point of your team, and he can just be a wing defender, ball handler type of guy, I don't think he's unplayable. I don't think he's terrible. But you know, it's going to be incredibly difficult for him to ever reach the point that he was at because you just can't play basketball so timidly and expect to do much. The other part of this, though, from my standpoint, that's interesting is a lot of the stuff he says around his injury, I think it is reasonable to question the timeline and the seriousness that he's kind of talking about here. Like, he gets asked in this interview, what were the hardest parts of your career? And one of the things he lists off is the time that he got traded when he was hurt. Didn't he want to be traded? Like, that confused me. He talks about some of the severity of this back thing. You know, he says that it got intensified as he was trying to come back by walking up the stairs, you know, and if it's truly that significant and he's being like fully honest about how it affected him, like, I don't know why you would think a dude as big as him who does have a history of other types of injuries is going to be healthy like ever again. I mean, we're having the same conversation about Lonzo Ball. I know it's more significant, but a dude who can't like walk up and down stairs or get up from bed without feeling significant pain, that doesn't sound like a guy who's going to be reaching anything close to the heights we're talking about, even if it is just like the reduced version we saw at the end of the Philly time. Like, that seems super serious, but he's talking about it somewhat casually. That's what was weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything with Ben, the whole thing, just how he's kind of talked about it, it has always just felt like a little weird to me. And like, that's not really the point of, I think, what we're hitting on here, but this whole thing has just felt like, I feel like we are just like missing information on like, from like so many angles of this. And if one day there's like a Ben Simmons like 30 for 30 and it's like we learn a bunch of stuff, like I wouldn't be surprised. You know? I mean, like I'm sure like like there's stuff with Clutch, there's stuff with the Sixers, there's just like so many angles of this where it's I don't feel like we know actually everything. There's just like information missing. There's information.
That's the other part of when he speaks publicly like this is there's now this increased layer of legalese that has to be like navigated by him, right? Because there was an actual lawsuit levied against the 76ers in order to get back pay for the money that they fined him for not showing up during his holdout. And so
like, for
he
a
can't
team,
like
for a
necessarily
team, yeah.
be honest about everything, but also the honesty would go a long way, I think, to help his fans and the fans of the teams that he's played for, like, understand the situation. So it is super bizarre, but I mean, the stakes are super high. If this guy doesn't get his act together, I'm not sure if he's in the NBA after this contract.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think there's a world where like if it doesn't go well, he's maybe not. He's like done after the season in some way.
Yeah,
I think it's
if they bottom out, you know,
or like middle of the season, like doesn't work. It's just like go home. We're there. We're staring down the abyss with Ben Simmons, and it's more unfortunate. I think if you don't have empathy for him in some way and how sad this is gone, like I understand you can feel a certain way as a fan, whatever. I think there's a big part of that's just it's sad.